Okay, hello everyone, and welcome back to our second Primate Conversation Seminar series of this term. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, this is an online seminar series run by the Primate Models for Behavior Evolution Lab here at Oxford. We invite experts from all over the world to present and discuss their work here with us. We tend to focus on primate evolution and behavior, but we also cover other topics such as cultural primatology, primate conservation, and even birds. Our seminars take place every Tuesday at 4 p.m. UK time. And if you want to know more about us or the series, you can check the lab link and our Twitter details in the comments. I would also recommend that you check our YouTube channel to catch up on the memorable talks we've had in the past. Today, we are very, very pleased to welcome Natalia Albuquerque. Natalia is a postdoc researcher at the Department of Experimental Psychology at the University of Sao Paulo in Brazil, where she also completed her master's and PhD. Natalia is an interdisciplinary researcher with vast experience in animal behavior and cognition, comparative and experimental psychology, animal communication, and animal welfare and conservation. She currently focuses on the mechanisms of social and emotional regulation. Natalia is a unique researcher in that she has worked with a large range of very, very different species, from turtles to goats, to dogs, to dolphins, up to monkeys. I only have time to mention a few of her fascinating interspecies work. So, for example, Natalia has shown that dogs can recognize emotion in humans by looking at their faces, and that they can respond to these signals by mouth licking. Similarly, she showed how goats prefer to interact with happy human faces. Natalia is also a conservationist, and she has been involved in several conservation research projects. For example, she conducted work with wild dolphins in Dolphin Bay in Brazil. By recording underwater vocalizations of dolphins and the sound of motorboats, she was able to show that the noise produced by tourism boats can interfere with dolphin communication. Natalia has also conducted fieldwork in the north of Brazil, where she collaborated on studies of nest site choice by hawksbill turtles. But Natalia is here with us today to talk about emotions, social behavior, social cognition, and how all this allows life in groups. For this, she will be looking at the fascinating social life of Capuchin monkeys. These neotropical monkeys, unlike other non-human primates, develop very slowly and they have an extended infancy. This provides a unique opportunity to study how particular behaviors and individual differences influence the development of their social bonds and interactions with others. So, without further delay, let me now please welcome Natalia on behalf of our lab and everyone watching. And thank you very much, Natalia, for being with us. And I will pass things now over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alejandra. And thank you everyone involved in the Primate Models Lab. Thank you, Dr. Caroline. Thank you, Dr. Susanna. And I'm very, very happy to be here. And thank you, Dr. Alejandra, for this lovely introduction. I didn't even recognize myself in that. Thank you very much. And yeah, as Dr. Alejandra said, my name is Natalia Albuquerque. I'm a postdoc researcher from the University of São Paulo. I'm a Brazilian researcher from Brazil, and I currently work at the Laboratory of Pathology, Development, and Social Interaction at the University of São Paulo, Brazil. And today I'm going to talk about emotional and social regulation in Capuchin monkeys. And yeah, we have so many interesting things to say that I think I'm just going to start. So I'm going to talk about bearded capuchin monkeys, these fascinating, extraordinary, um, extremely interesting neurotropical monkeys. And capuchin monkeys, they have very complex and diverse social dynamics. And as Dr. Alejandra said, they have very um, slow development and an extended infancy when compared to other non-primate species. And one thing that is very interesting, that is strikingly interesting about capuchin monkeys, is that their infants spend most of their time on the back of their mothers, of other adults, of juveniles, rather than on their stomach. So this sort of interaction here, over here, it's very common, but this sort of interaction over here, the face-to-face interaction, it's not as common as in other non-human primate species. The capuchin monkeys are social primates that use a variety of behaviors for social regulation, such as facial expressions. And here we have a really nice diagram with images of some of these facial expressions exhibited by capuchin monkeys, by bearded capuchin monkeys. This is from De Marco and Albuquerque, 2007. And at the same time, they express themselves through facial expressions. They are sensitive to the facial expressions of other individuals. But then, yeah, we're talking about emotional regulation, social regulation, um, and emotions. Emotions, it's such a common thing. We're always talking about emotions. We as human beings are very emotional beings, and I'm at this very moment am emotional, and I'm pretty sure that every one of you is experiencing some kind of emotion, but what are these emotions? If we look at them in depth, what are these emotions? Well, the first thing that we must know is that emotions are directly related to how individuals perceive their surroundings and how they react to these surroundings. Um, so it's not just a matter of obtaining some sort of information from the environment, but also providing some sort of information in the shape of behavior, for example. And some authors will actually say that emotions are a means of evaluating experience. Emotions consist of morphological, physiological, and behavioral changes, and several psychological mechanisms are involved in both their generation and their expression. And even though emotions are a subjective experience and they're particular to each individual, they have these identifiable and observable and measurable components that we can study. And in fact, it's it's this tight relationship between specific emotions and specific emotional expressions that allows us as human researchers to study emotions. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to do such studies with individuals that don't speak our language. And here you can see two examples of facial expressions um, um, shown by bearded Capuchin monkeys. And from emotions, we move to emotional regulation. Well, when we think about emotions, we must think about their two main roles. One of them is an individual role, and the other one is a social role. And when we talk about the individual role of emotions, we talk about self-regulation. And self-regulation enables an individual to evaluate and to appropriate, to perform appropriate responses, to exhibit appropriate responses to a diversity of situations. And when we talk about the social role of emotions, we talk about social regulation. And social regulation enables the transmission and the reception of ecologically relevant information. And this is an idea that is becoming more and more and more popular, that emotions can be defined as a complex, multidimensional psychological phenomenon that influences the maintenance and the control of behavior. And even more, some authors will say that emotions might even interfere in how events are registered in an animal's memory. So this is to show how important, how powerful emotions are. The way that we perceive our environment and the way that we react to our environment might channel our entire behavior and behavioral patterns. And not only that, but also our cognition and the way that we process all sorts of information from our physical and social environment. And here is an example of a social, a positive, affiliative play interaction in Capuchin monkeys. In these bearded Capuchin monkeys, I'm going to talk about. So we can see different facial displays, different body positions, different sorts of interaction. So we have here an interaction of an infant with the male alpha, and interactions between infants. And out of a sudden, everyone gets startled and climbs the tree. And then after a few seconds, they start to come down and to resume their activities. So they start manipulating stones. They start playing with leaves again. They start behaving in different ways, showing different body postures and showing different facial expressions as well. And all that happened in a very, very short amount of time. So in 1 minute, we have all that going on. And I'm not even going into the details here. It's just an overview of what's going on. And to give an example of a behavior that can be seen as both self-regulatory and social regulatory, I'm going to talk about a different species. I'm going to talk about dogs. And this is only an example, and I'm sure, I promise you, this will make sense in a few minutes. But here we have a dog, and here we have this behavior, which is called mouth licking. And I'm pretty sure that most of you have seen this behavior, has experienced looking at a dog and watching this behavior occur in front of you. And it's just the as the name suggests, the licking of the dog's own mouth. So the dog licks their own mouth, their own nose, their own muzzle, and this is not licking. And mouth licking is believed for at least 2 decades to be a stress coping behavior or stress coping mechanism. But we didn't have a systematic information, systematic data to show, to tell us about the function of this behavior or the real underlying mechanisms um, supporting this behavior. So what we did was, and we used the same setup as from our 2016 biology lectures paper. We put the dogs in front of two screens, and in each screen there will be a face of an individual, and it could be a dog or a human. And on one side, it will be a negative face, on the other side, a positive face. And at the same time, we would expose the dogs or present the dogs with a neutral, a positive, or a negative sound. And what we did was we investigated their looking behavior and their mouth licking behavior. And important to say is that we didn't use any kind of reinforcement or training, and no food was involved. So the occurrence of the mouth licking behavior was not food related, or a positive anticipation from some sort of training related also. Well, so here's the behavior, and what did we found? We found no effect of sound, which was surprising because, well, dogs, sound is very important to dogs. We found an effect, a strong effect of image, and we found a strong effect of species. So to sum up, what we found was a response that was dependent of valence. So mouth licking was triggered by negative faces, by species. It was triggered by negative human faces, and by the sensory modality, well, was triggered by images and not sound. And here in this the video clip, you can see that as soon as the human face, the negative human face shows up, comes up, the dog the dog exhibits the mouth licking. And what we believe is that this response is linked to the perception of emotional information. And this is complementary to the cognitive tests that we conducted and published on the other paper. Um, and what we also discussed is that this mouth licking behavior is possibly associated to the dog's own affective state. And being so, it can be understood as a self-regulatory behavior. And moreover, because it was directed to human faces, sound didn't pose an effect. And humans are so visual, and the mouth licking behavior is visual, is a visual behavior. We believe that mouth licking may be a signal to facilitate communication with humans. Not saying that it's intentional, we don't know that yet, but it could be something to facilitate communication. And if so, then mouth licking can also be social regulatory behavior. And then we move back to non-human primates and we go back to the lip smacking behavior, which is this fascinating behavior exhibited by bearded capuchin monkeys with such high frequency. Well, lip smacking behavior is the rapid movement of the upper and the lower jaw of the monkey, and it can come along with lip protrusion or not. And as I said, it's very common in bearded capuchin monkeys. It's believed to be affiliative, and in capuchin monkeys, when we see this behavior, it is usually directed towards an infant, a baby monkey. Well, so it could happen between mother infant, non-mother adult infant, juvenile infant, and infant infant. And here's an example, and I want you to pay close attention to this individual here, who is a juvenile called Presente. And well, we have a mother and the baby. Presente is here doing his thing. And then what happens is that he turns his head and he sees the baby's face. And next, and this happens so quickly, is that Presente is so close, it's almost glued to the baby's face, and it's doing lip smacking. It's performing lip smacking. And it's funny because with bearded capuchin monkeys, it seems they are especially drawn to babies. They like babies. They see babies and they go towards babies. And lip smacking is in the middle of all that. And here is a video clip showing we have this baby here, and this baby starts showing his tongue, and we don't know if it's tongue protrusion or just tongue out. But this individual here, once he sees the baby face and the baby facial expression, he starts doing lip smacking, and it's a very intense and clear lip smacking with some other emotional expression associated. Well, regarding lip smacking, we know, like literature and all the scientists, there's already a body of evidence that tells us a quite good deal of information about lip smacking and when lip smacking occurs and what happens after lip smacking is um, given or performed. But still, we have many differences between species, non-human primate species, and even so, there's so much we still don't know, and we want to um, contribute to the understanding of the function of this behavior. That's such a fascinating behavior. But well, what we know is that in non-human primates, lip smacking plays the role of appeasing the receptor and facilitating affiliation. Lip smacking may facilitate the coordination and regulation of other affiliative behaviors, especially grooming. And lip smacking may be related to the emotional regulation of the infant. And again, this differs across species, and we still don't know much about the function of this behavior. And well, we were talking about emotions and emotional regulation, and now we're talking about behaviors that are that involves emotions. They embrace emotions, but they are directed towards another subject, another individual. So we can talk now about social regulation. But well, when we're talking about social regulation in social animals, we can't dissociate with emotional regulation. So you see what I was going to tell you, what I'm going to say is very intrinsically bonded, linked to everything else that I said so far. Well, so emotion perception, as we said, for social regulation, um, if we are able to social regulate, we can transmit and receive ecologically relevant information. And when we talk about emotion perception, um, this ability has a very important role in several animal species. but it's especially important to those species that organize themselves in very complex, cohesive groups. So, on one hand, feeling emotions allows an individual to regulate their own behavior. On the other hand, receiving emotions allows the acquisition of those ecologically relevant information that I've already mentioned. And when we're talking about emotions and social regulation, we must go back to the beginning where I said that emotions are closely connected or linked to how an individual perceives and reacts to their environment, to their surroundings, being that physical or social. And then here we talk about a new category or a new dimension, which is emotional reactivity or react, just how emotionally charged a reaction to something is. And in fact, um, some authors will say that emotional reactivity is so important that it's critical for the regulation of maternal behavior. And other authors would say that emotional processes are central to the exhibition of affiliative behavior and for the regulation of social interactions. And now I remember the conversation Caroline, Alejandra, and I were having just before we started this. Um, and this is it. Emotions are what grounds everything. The way that we perceive and react to the environment is what grounds everything. It's fundamental for everything, being cooperation, aggression, being anything that we can think of, emotions will be related to it. And taking all of that, we can say that how individuals perceive and process physical and social stimuli will channel the way they act. So this emotional information or this emotional reactivity will bring an individual to behave in the way the way A or B or C or D. So it will channel this individual to act in some sort of different pattern. And again, as I said, when we talk about social animals, we can't dissociate emotional regulation from social regulation because they walk together. They just they are fundamental to everything. And here's the video clip, and I'm gonna let you watch it. It's very short. Well, something happened. This mother here with her baby perceived what happened, and she reacted to what happened, and she behaved aggressively. Um, the way that she positioned her body, the way that she showed her teeth, the way that she pushed herself in front, even in front of the male that was beside her. Um, so the way that this female bearded capuchin monkey perceived and react to to her environment channeled the way that she acted, the way that she behaved. And then we can talk about two main dimensions. One of them is linked to the perception of threat, of discomfort, and of stressful events and stimuli. And the other one is linked to the perception of positive events and stimuli, engagement, physical and social, energy, and affiliation. And as you can see from this beautiful picture, The emotional experience will result in adaptive behaviors and behavioral patterns, because then I will be able to regulate what I should do in the different situations I'm presented to. Should I be chilled? Chill? Should I be restless? Should I be aggressive? Should I cooperate? Should I begin a conflict? And so all of this emotional um, experiences and processes will result in adaptive behavior. And moreover, the expression and the perception of emotion eliciting cues will regulate the behavior and the exhibition of appropriate responses. That's basically what I just just said. And just to talk about a bit about our current research, um, that I'm very excited about, but I really wanted to bring this introduction um, because it's just so fascinating, and I hope you find it too. But it will ground everything that I will say from now on. Well, so I work with these beautiful beings, with babies, with infants, as I will tell you. And we are working now with more than 1,000 videos of naturalistic focal observations. We study 10 bearded capuchin monkeys from the species Sapajus libidinosus. And we study two strategic developmental points, which is the second month and the ninth month. I mean strategic for the species, of course. It's not the same thing for other primates, as you may know. And we have a total duration of more than 3,000 minutes of video of data. So we have lots and lots of data to work with. And these 10 bearded capuchin monkeys are from the same group. It's a wild group from Brazil. They're completely free range. They're wild, and they're from Fazenda Boa Vista in Piauí, the northeast of Brazil. And here you can see a bit of the how the area looks, and it's a very complex environment. Well, and before continuing, I have to stop to not only thank, but also show my admiration for these 5 women. I am very lucky to work with strong, powerful, and empowered women. First of all, my advisor, Professor Patricia Zah, which is a brilliant human being and researcher, and my dear students, Ana Clara Varela, Marina Belli, Beatriz Felicio, and Juliana França. And I must say that even though pandemic, this entire period, it's been horrible and sad and so complicated, and I'm sure most of you know that we're still going through some very troubling times here in Brazil, politically, economically, and health-wise, of course. We have stick together, and we have kept our motivation on, and I have seen this 4 beautiful young researchers bloom, and they kept working really hard, and I'm very thankful for my advisor and for this amazing group of people. Well, so I got a bit emotional, but I'm okay. I always say that I'm allowed to be emotional because I work with emotions. So, um, but my current research is divided into 3 lines, and I'm gonna talk briefly about these 3 lines, and show some results, and then we can discuss about it afterwards. Well, so the first one, lip smacking. I've been talking about lip smacking over and over and over nonstop. So yeah, I'm working on on trying to understand the function of lip smacking. So we know that lip smacking is linked to affiliative behaviors and to face-to-face interaction in Capuchin monkeys. And here we have this beautiful picture of one of these interactions. Another video clip. As you can see, this female here, she is doing lip smacking directed at this baby's face, and she's putting a lot of effort onto making the baby look at her and stay close to her. She's even grabbed and pulled the baby's arm towards her to make this baby closer to her. So, well, we have a few questions that we want to answer. First of all, we know that lip smacking is linked to face-to-face behavior, but is lip smacking a face-to-face behavior? Completely different. We also want to know what is the function of lip smacking and what is the role of emotions in lip smacking. So when looking at the receiver, and I'm calling the receiver the infant in this case, it's the individual who receives, who is the target of the lip smacking behavior. So when we're looking at the receiver, we see that the infant spends the same amount of time directed at the giver's face and elsewhere. So that means that they don't spend most of their time looking or directed at the giver's face. They do spend some time directed at the giver's face. However, they spend a great amount of time looking to the leaves around, to another individual, to the sky, and elsewhere, which says a lot about the perception of the receiver regarding the behavior, lip smacking. And we know that we found that infants spend more time not in physical contact with the giver than in physical contact with the giver. So again, instead of being in close contact with the giver during lip smacking, the babies seem to not care about being in physical contact with the giver, which again says a lot about the perception of the receiver regarding the behavior. When you look at the giver, who is the individual that exhibits the behavior, the lip smacking, we found that givers do spend more time directed towards the face, the infant's face, as previously believed. However, they also perform lip smacking towards other parts of the infant's body, that being the head, the hand, the foot, the tail, the back. So there's a whole variety of places that can be target of lip smacking. But something that is very interesting is that givers, they present an active search for the face of the infant. So they seem to be motivated to find the infant's face and to be in close contact and in face-to-face interaction. And then we looked a bit on the associated emotions that come along with lip smacking. And these associated emotional displays are tongue protrusion, tongue out, open mouth, scalp lifting. We have a whole range, again, of emotional displays. And what we found is that there is an effect of these associated emotional displays play a role onto the duration of lip smacking, a positive effect um, linked to the duration of the lip smacking. And what is most interesting is that even though these emotional displays only occur for 3% of the total duration of lip smacking, they have an important role on the maintenance of the behavior. So even for a short time, they possess this huge role onto this the exhibition of this behavior. Well, the second line is related to the opportunities of visual access to a face, which we call VAF. Well, social primates must pay attention and process the facial expressions of others in order to develop highly functional behaviors of their own, such as playing patterns. Um, and what we were interested in was that um, infants, they are exposed to some very ecologically relevant visual information throughout their day, their week, their month, their lives. And we have, for example, in this situation, this baby can see the male alpha face. In this other situation, the baby from a different angle can see the mother's face, his mother's face. And from this other example, the baby can see an unrelated juvenile face. So they're exposed to this very important, relevant, ecologically relevant information all the time. And here another video clip. Oops, another video clip. We have an infant here, the male alpha approaching, and we can see that for a time, for this while, the infant inspects the male alpha space and then continues doing whatever he wants to do. And then from that, we have I'm sorry, I'm in Brazil. You know, it's hot. And from that, we have more questions. So, does visual stimulation affect the development of social cognition and social behavior? Is the behavioral content of VAF similar between different points of development? And how is the processing of VAF information linked to development? So one of the things that we found was that the behaviors and the infants exhibit during VAF, they differ between the second and the ninth month in terms of frequency and occurrence, but they do not vary in terms of duration. And the similar duration, what we are discussing now and looking further into this, is that the similar duration may be related to the time that is necessary to obtain this sort of relevant information from the faces. So if I need 2 or 3 seconds to obtain this information, why should I stay longer looking at someone else's face if I don't need that? Yeah, we're looking into that now, as I said, but it's already very exciting result. And we also found that the identity of the monkey who is being observed does not affect VAF duration. However, month has an important effect. And we found a higher means or a longer duration on the second month. So when we talk about the acquisition and the use of social information, we always talking about discussing what, who, where, how, but we're not that interested in when. And maybe here, when is the key for understanding how this all works. So when is critical for the acquisition and processing of visual information about faces. That's what our results suggest. And maybe we're talking about an initial social development pattern. I'm sorry. And last but not least, we have the emotional reactivity and linked to temperament um, line of research. And here I have two video clips. They're eating their thing, and out of sudden something happens. They get startled, and they move away. And here we have Patricia here and the male dominant, and she wants to move away, but he grabs her and he pulls her back, and she starts screaming. She becomes really restless, kind of anxious, and she changes her entire behavior. Um, so this is an example of this emotional reactivity. And again, we have a few questions. So how can we look at infants' behavior in a way that is sensitive enough to identify individual differences in early infancy? And can particular temperament categories be predictive of developmental stage? So when we're talking about animals such as capuchin monkeys, we have to bear in mind that their social environment is frequently changing. And the individuals, they must learn how to regulate their feelings and their actions in order to succeed within a group. Otherwise, they just won't. And what I believe is that instead of looking at the structure and processes of human personality, research should assess the patterns of responses in emotion eliciting contexts, accounting for the ecological demands, the social dynamics, and the physical challenges of each species or each population. We did a first attempt, and this is a very preliminary results, but we looked at dependence measured by spatial proximity to another individual, juvenile or adult, social engagement measured by the behavior of approaching an individual and an adult, and energy measured by locomotion. And what we found is that infants did show differences in the means, but due to this great intra-individual variation, it was not possible to identify significant differences. So, well, we have two paths to 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 run, and we will run both. But one of them is that we still have a lot of data that we're finalizing coding, and we will analyze and see these final results. But at the same time, maybe it is into this great intra-individual variation that our emotional reactivity answers are. So we will also look into that in the near future. As for the next chapters, this is just a joke because it's just a very cute video of a sleepy monkey. And unlike the sleepy monkey, we're very active and we're working really hard and we're producing. And we hope that in the near future we will have our final results regarding these questions, and we'll have our new papers published, and maybe, who knows, we'll be able to share with you at some point. And with that, I would like to thank all my lab. We're a lot of people, and I would like to thank especially Professor Patricia and Professor Briseida Rezende. They're the head of the lab, and all my peers, all my colleagues, all these brilliant researchers. I would also like to thank the field assistants and to say that without them, none of this would ever be possible. their work, their dedication, and it's just priceless, and I'm very thankful for them. And to thank these beautiful creatures, these bearded capuchin monkeys, the babies, the infants, the juveniles, and the adults. And without them, we wouldn't be able to be making science after all. And with that, I end my talk. I would like to say thank you and obrigada, Dr. Susana. I know she's Portuguese, so I left my obrigada. For those who don't know what it means thank you. I would like to thank the funding agencies, the federal and the state funding agency, project at the SABOS, my lab, the Institute of Psychology, and the Experimental Psychology grad program. Here you can find my email, my professional Instagram account, professional Twitter account, and my research gate. That's it. Please be in contact, and I'm here for all the questions you may have. I'm sorry if I talked too much. I think I got yeah, too excited, too emotional. But thank you very much.
Wow, Natalia, thank you so much. This has just been an incredible talk in terms of, I think for many of us who, you know, very much maybe focus on the behavior itself, or, you know, and the implications thereof, but just, you know, as we were talking before the talk in terms of the foundational aspect of this being this kind of emotional, you know, self-regulation as well as social regulation. So thank you for introducing this to us, but also conveying that broadened perspective, and we, you know, sharing your findings for dogs. But just how wonderful it was of the focus on the lip smacking, because for many of us who study primates, who may have observed lip smacking, as you say, just the different contexts, just how wonderful to then, you know, take us through that for dogs and then for capuchins. And wow, we're so excited to read these papers coming out. Congratulations to all of you in terms of just what you've been finding. And as I say, we've got lots of questions, and in some ways I'm just feeling so emotional. I don't know where to start really. I think, yeah, I think you also throughout your talk just really remind us about that emotional aspect and how present, and what it, you know, it drives everything, as you say. So this is really wonderful for all of us, and I think especially for us to go away and think about in the context of our own research questions, you know, that we should be paying far, you know, more attention to the emotional aspect, both individually and in social contexts, to be thinking of that as a foundation. So thank you. Okay, so where to start?
Thank you. Do you want me to take off this slide, or should I?
No, that's fine. We can go from here. So I've got a flood of questions, and one being in terms of the emotions, you know, in terms of the emotions and how you described in terms of individual level in the processing and the implications, as you say, in thinking for kind of applying this in our own, you know, research and collecting of data to really think of the ecological, social, you know, many parameters to be thinking of, taking it away, as you say, from that human personality perspective. I've got one question here: is emotion, you know, are emotions socially learned, or are they genetically determined? And can we find patterns of variation between different populations that could be attributed to this social learning, as you say, in order to kind of survive within their group, within their network, etc., rather than just the, you know, ecology or genetics? I know that's kind of the methods of exclusion, and quite, you know, it's far more complex than that. But could we just hear your thoughts on that, Talia?
I think that's a great question, and in fact, as you just said, it is. I think I do believe it's more complex than being socially learned or being genetically determined. And I do believe and I've learned that from my mentors that everything is a huge interaction. So we do have genetic features that we must consider, and at the same time we must consider the developmental path of each individual, and even the ecological features of where a population lives, for example. But this is something that I'm bringing to my research questions, because when I think about temperament or the results of the studies that we have on personality, we usually don't take into consideration that these animals will learn how to regulate themselves during their lifetime. And I do believe that this is something that we need to considerate, that we need to take into account. And when we will look, for example, at this, I'm working with this population, but maybe if I start working, and that was the aim, the goal before the pandemic, to work with another population as well, of of um, of Capuchin monkeys. But maybe if they have a higher risk of predation, for example, and they will have to be more frightened. They will have to be, maybe they will be more easily startled, and they will present more anxious like behaviors or restlessness, and that I don't find in this population. So I do believe that we need to take into account the ecological and the social aspects of the individual, the group, or the environment where they live. And I do think that when we're talking about regulation, the emotions in itself, maybe they won't change, but how individuals regulate, I think that will.
Wow, well, let's hope at some point, as you say, you can expand and explore to other populations and address some of these questions. I mean, some of the questions in your last few slides in the publication were really interesting. Again, in thinking the question of the function of lip smacking, we see it across primates, we see it across, in a broader context across organisms, and really trying to tease apart the function of it for the different species, different taxa is fascinating. And I just really, I can't even imagine. I mean, I hear in terms of video coding and watching videos, I mean, what you were showing us was just seconds, and to tease apart, to really explore and consider, as you say, that difference between the emotional, social regulation and the challenge in teasing these apart. And so one other question was just in watching this, and it came up as well, and I think you're saying that there's a challenge for for social, highly social organisms, and of course that will certainly include primates, but just teasing them apart. And have you had thoughts on just maybe for future directions of just even a starting point on that? Because if you feel that there might be any avenue to explore to tease those apart at all.
It's interesting that you asked about that thing that I say about highly social organisms. And I've worked with sea turtles, and I think they can't allocate much time or much effort onto learning how to social regulate. But I do believe, and this is something that I would really like to explore in depth. I do believe that they will have mechanisms, like strong mechanisms, like self-regulatory mechanisms, because all animals, at least as we can say, all mammals have emotions, and then we can go a bit further and say birds have emotions, and then I do believe that all animals have emotions. I just think that they're a bit different than yeah, across species. Um, but I think that for those animals who are not social or highly social organisms, I think they will um, develop their self-regulatory mechanisms, possibly even more than the social animals. And but as far as I know, no one has ever done that, and I hope I will one day. But yeah, I think we can, if we can dissociate that, I think I would go in that direction.
Wow, well, we hope so too, Natalia. And I guess there's a bit of a mix of a questions here. It's quite of curiosity, and I think you did explain your talk, but just again to hear from you in terms of, so we're talking about, as you say, maybe how we measure, identify degrees of sociality across organisms, but so one question is very much in thinking of your choice in terms of Capuchins, what kind of drove you to Capuchins? And of course, as Alejandra said, and how you shared in your talk, you've been studying multiple organisms. So I guess there's two questions. One is to try, I think we're curious to hear more on your choice of Capuchins, and what drove you to that, but also for future directions for yourself, what you might be interested in of species you might be interested to study, as you say, to maybe explore that kind of emotional social regulation aspect, and in alignment maybe, or in association with how you measure the social aspect. But are there species? So that's the second question. So I guess there's two here. So I won't overload you anymore because there's just so many.
And if I don't answer you something that you asked, please ask again. Yeah, I'm still very emotional and excited, so I might forget something. um, but so yeah, capuchin monkeys. I did. I told my advisor that I don't know, a couple weeks ago, that I started looking at them because I wanted to bring this conceptual and theoretical background of emotional regulation and social regulation that I developed during my work with dogs and goats and other animals, especially dogs, and to bring that to studying non-human primates, and I knew that they were very complex, and they're beautiful in their sociality, and they're very complex. They're very and there's still so much to know about them. But after I think day after day, I started falling in love with them because they showed me so much more. And for example, this this these results that we're getting now, um, for the 3 lines of research, they're telling us so much more than we thought. Um, that maybe, for example, for lip smacking, maybe lip smacking means different things for the giver and for the receiver. We haven't thought of that, and that tells a great deal about function. Um, and again, about the associated emotions that come. So maybe you have a self-regulatory mechanism in place during lip smacking, and this is just fantastic. So there's, there's so much, and I would love to keep studying them. I don't want to stop studying capuchin monkeys anymore, and I told my advisor that a couple of days ago also, because every time that I see a result, see like some data, it just tells me so much more. I think these little monkeys will teach us so much about how emotions and how emotional processes and emotion eliciting interactions allows, all this allows living in groups. I think they will teach us, a great deal. I do believe that. And I forgot this your second question. I don't know if I answered the first one. And
no, that was wonderful. Absolutely. The second one was, I guess, thinking again in and where to take this. I mean, for all of us to be thinking about, but for you, other species that you would like to explore. I mean, I really want to come back to the giver receiver aspect in a minute for the Capuchins, but just the second question was, and that's curiosity, people are curious to know in terms of other species that you would like to study, and perhaps some reasons for this.
Well, so I would like to, I would love to look at other primates, non-human primate species, to look, for example, at lip smacking and, looking across these various species, because we know that it differs and they might have different functions, which is, again, incredible, because you have the same behavior that have, what can we tell about evolution if we have the same behavior that has the same physical mechanisms that happens in completely different contexts and may have completely different functions. It's just fantastic. But also look at other non-human primate species. These are the more social cognition related to emotional regulation. Everything related to emotions. I'm always I'm always interested in emotions. But look at how some cognitive abilities develop through this sort of different emotional experiences with the world and emotional reactivity and all that. So I would really like to study these main aspects in other non-human primate species. I think especially from a comparative perspective. But I would also like to go back on studying sea turtles and other marine animals, because I think that their senses, their sensory modalities are completely different from terrestrial life. And so figuring out how they process emotional information and how they transmit emotional information would be step one, and then building from there. And I don't know, octopuses. I would love to study octopuses. So maybe one day, yeah.
Wow, I think many of us will agree what a wonderful choice. And again, just I say, thinking of the sensory aspect and thinking of kind of that emotional and social regulation, or even just the emotional regulation and their response to their environment. So, in being in a completely, as you say, a completely different sensory, in terms of sensory, completely different environment, marine. So yeah, I hope that happens. Gosh, I mean, yeah, you're right. Octopuses are just so fascinating. So to look at the emotional regulation and even the social regulation when they do interact with, be wonderful. Okay, I think we've only got time for one or two more questions, unfortunately. So I'm going to scan because there's literally, oh my goodness, so many.
That's good.
Let me just I'm sorry, yeah, I'm just scanning down. So in terms of maybe some of the workers that were cited, and just thinking about how we can even explore some of these aspects. So I say hats off in terms of exploring this in wild populations, but there's do you feel, for example, of the work that's been done maybe on emotional and social regulation has been carried out in captive settings. Do you feel that there's notable differences based on kind of, I guess, of course, there will be in terms of social and emotional regulation, but maybe between wild and captive populations of species, that, or your feeling of that for a particular species, let's say, do you feel there's notable differences in the findings and perhaps what could be driving that?
Yeah, so I think the first thing that I would say is that as a scientist and in I think that we lack on comparisons, systematic comparisons on the data that we obtained from wild and from captive populations or groups. I know that we have wild populations are under study because it's just so hard to study them. But I don't think we have enough comparisons, systematic comparisons between wild and captive to have a really good image, good picture of these differences. However, I think, and I'll add two things to this part of my answer. One thing is that this sort of more subtle differences, for example, when we're studying emotions, emotional regulation, and all these mechanisms, we have to have access to very subtle changes in the behavior. Otherwise, you will lose information, and you won't be able to make appropriate conclusions on that. So I do believe that captive settings so far have allowed us to do some sort of studies that, because it's a captive setting and you can control for things, then some of the information that we have now, up to date, is only possible because of these studies. However, though, I do believe that there are considerable differences in all the processes. And I think the expression of emotions will be different, the perception of the expressions will be different, the social regulation, the emotional regulation mechanisms, they might not even develop in the way they will develop in the wild, because you lack all sorts of uncertainties and information and risks and freedom. So I do think that developing a methodology that allows us to look at these aspects in the wild may be very helpful, and maybe and I don't know, might be used by other people to do that also in the wild. It's not easy, but yeah, we can all collaborate. And yeah, we have worked really hard in refining our methodology before starting coding and all that, because we already had the videos, because Professor Patricia has been doing work on this field site for many years, so we already had the videos, but the methodology for extracting this sort of information from these videos, yeah, we had to create, elaborate, refine. So yeah, so maybe we can now move towards doing that sort of study, of investigation with wild population. And yeah, that's it. And anyone who's ever interested in doing so, from early career projects to, you know, people who's been in the field and working on primates for decades, we can talk and we can share information and maybe make that happen in a greater scale. Is it it okay, Caroline? Do you want me to keep talking? I can keep talking if you want. Oh, hello. Okay, so I'm gonna keep talking. Oh, is that okay? Oh, we have guests. Oh, we have.
We have here also the dogs watching. I'm sorry. Yes, Caroline, are you okay? Can you carry on?
I'm so sorry, Natalia. My son's just hurt himself, and so he's fine, but he's just hurt his finger, and I just couldn't. Yeah, I'm so sorry about that.
Or do you want to bring him? He's more than welcome.
He's I've just given him comforted him, and now his dad is, and I'm going to go and comfort him again. But so I'm just sorry I had to go off camera for that. But Natalia, just thank you so much. I'm sure Alejandra, all of us, just thank you so much for such a wonderful talk, and thank you for addressing the questions. There are so many more questions, but we just can't. We just run out of time. So as anyone who has further questions, please, as I say, Natalia on her slide here has given ways of contacting. I'm sure you're going to have people contacting you to explore more. So thank you so much for your talk today. I'm just going to mention that for next week, we have Kate Wong, who's going to give a talk. So at the same time at 4 o'clock UK time, Tuesday, the 11th of May, we'll be having our next Primate Conversation talk by Kate Wong, who will be looking at science writing for the public. So you can submit questions if you wish to Kate in advance on a Google form provided in the live chat, which can be found in our social media. So please feel free in that respect to provide, to put down your questions. And so we're going to leave it there. So thank you very much, Natalia.
Thanks for having me. And congratulations on this whole initiative. It's brilliant.
We're just very lucky to have you, to come and give a talk today.